If you haven't already, make sure you're comfy and getting ready to rock. Just give it another minute. Good morning to those that have just joined us. We're just waiting for everyone to arrive now, just giving a few minutes just for people to arrive. And then we'll get started. Tracy, how are we looking? Should we make a start? Fantastic. Well, as I keep saying, I've said it so far about 5 times, but good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Cybersecurity and the Continually Changing Environment webinar, which is quite difficult to say on 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, but I managed it. My name is Adam Hunt, and I'm the Digital Transformation Lead here at the National Care Forum. So we are the leading voice of the not-for-profit care sector, and we have membership organisations spanning the length and breadth of England, providing care and support in various guises across a range of settings. So today, we're really pleased to be joining our partners Towergate with Richard Barnes and his colleagues from Towergate on the call today. Thanks for the wave. And they have brought Matt Lewis, the UK and EU cyber team leader for CFC Underwriting, who are one of their insurance partners, to come and present today. So this is set to be a really insightful webinar, which we're sure you're going to have lots of takeaways from. We are recording the session, so please feel free to leave your cameras off if you wish. And to get the most out of this as well, please use the Q&A tool at the top of your screen, or use the chat, whatever you feel more comfortable with, to ask any questions. Matt will be providing opportunities to ask questions throughout too, but if you want to keep that ongoing conversation, please use those functions. And if you'd like to use the chat now, you can introduce yourself and tell us what organisation you're from, where you're joining us from, and that will be absolutely fantastic. It lets us get to know you a bit more. Please can you remember as well to stay muted, and if you do have any questions there as well, you can use the raise hand gesture, or you can pop the bits in the Q&A or the chat. So it just minimises the amount of interruptions that Matt will get, so it doesn't break his flow. So this webinar closely follows the launch of the brand new cybersecurity strategy for health and social care, called A Cyber Resilient Health and Adult Social Care System in England, and that looks forward to the year 2030. And that's the strategy's focus is really on that unified approach to maintain a secure environment on which we use digital technology to safely store and share information. And that strategy's vision for organisations is to be better able to manage their cyber risk, to be able to protect their service users and their staff data, and be able to quickly respond and recover from a cyber attack. And this is ultimately leading to increased trust in the sector's use of digital systems. And then that in turn will lead to more technological innovations being applied with confidence. And this is really vital and more now than ever with the advent of the Digitising Social Care Fund, which is now entering its 2nd year of funding. And that continues to increase the use of digital social care record systems or digital care planning systems and other digital care technologies in the sector. And as that digitisation increases, so does the risk. And as providers, we need to ensure we have developed our own internal strategies for minimising or managing that risk, and that we have those solid foundations to support safe digital transformation. And at the core, we need to have that good information and data management. We need to have those safe processes and a workforce that have the knowledge and skills. So a quick plug here, but free support is available to providers from digital social care and Better Security, Better Care programme for improving your data protection and data security. So uniquely, the Better Security, Better Care programme provides that free guidance and support for providers to complete the Data Security and Protection Toolkit, which is one of the most comprehensive ways to understand the cybersecurity arrangements you have in place. And the Data Security and Protection Toolkit provides that assurance that you are undertaking good data security and personal information is handled correctly. So a fantastic place to start on assessing that. So with a new cyber strategy committed to improving our cyber resilience, it really all starts now with having that case for change. So if you're looking for that catalyst, or you're looking to come here for increasing your knowledge on the current cyber environment, then genuinely you have come to that right place. And on that note, I'm now going to shut up and I'm going to hand over to Mr. Matt Lewis. So thank you, Matt.
Thank you very much, Adam. That's very kind of you. Morning, everyone. Thank you very much for having me. What I'm going to do is quickly get some slides up so you've got something to look at rather than just my face on a Tuesday morning, which no one needs, but just to prove that I am actually a person, not a piece of AI, as the world is at the moment. It seems to be going that way increasingly. So here we go. Let's get this up and let's go on to a nice little slideshow of information because everyone likes information. So obviously we were planning to do this last week, but obviously as we found out, Eventbrite were down last week, which goes to show anyone can be affected by a cyber issue. So a fantastic little segue into there. But as we kick into it, so thank you very much. Adam said I am Matt Lewis. I am the UK and EU cyber team leader here at CFC. I've been underwriting and working in the cyber insurance market for just short of 6 years now. 6 years and about 2 weeks, so very, very, very soon. And obviously that's kind of been throughout the entire kind of fledgling kind of UK market for cyber. I've kind of really been heavily involved. So it's given me kind of a quite a unique ability to be able to actually see kind of the transferring landscape over the last kind of few years. And hopefully what we're going to see here is kind of how it's going to change. Now, just to kind of give you a bit of an idea as to who we are as CFC, just in case you haven't heard of us, we are a specialist insurance provider. We kind of write clients all over the world. As you can see here, we've got well over 120,000 customers and write well over $1 billion in premium of offices here in the UK, in the US, and over in Australia as well. We've got extensive knowledge, and in particular, when you kind of look at it from a specific point of view, we've got extensive knowledge in the UK. We've got well over kind of 15,000 clients, loads of underwriters that actually underwrite each individual kind of case, and we are the kind of the scheme provider for BIBA and also the top cyber provider as well in the UK. So we've got the experience and the pedigree to know what we're actually talking about. And we're very much kind of at the forefront of all cyber within the UK, and in particular, we work very closely with Towergate, and we write kind of a large number of clients in healthcare, but also especially in care already. So it's good for us to be able to kind of have that insight and have some real kind of good information straight from the horse's mouth, as it were, by being able to actually speak to and help some of our care clients. And we have seen a number of claims in the care community over the kind of last 3-4 years in particular. So I'm just going to go into kind of, obviously we can down to our products, so we're not about here about that today, but what is cyber? So I think the first thing is kind of to understand what cyber is and what we're kind of here to talk about in cyber insurance. Now, there's always a few buzzwords that kind of fly around there, and people talk about data breaches and cyber liability and all these types of things, and it can be quite confusing. But essentially what a cyber product does and how it kind of operates, in short, is it's protecting you guys primarily from a first party basis. In terms of what I mean by that is kind of the damage to your systems, the interruption to your business interruption, and the cost of dealing with a cyber incident. Those are actually probably the most kind of damaging and the highest cost that we actually tend to see. Now, we do cover a third party part of it, so the privacy liability if someone has a data breach and someone looks to kind of receive liability off the back of that. But what the primary thing I really want to highlight today is how that can affect you as a business in terms of, one, just the damage it can cause from the different types of attacks that we'll talk about today, but also the interruption that can cause to the business and the difficulties that can lead to. And then finally, kind of really what the cost of actually dealing with that is, and how a cyber policy or cyber insurance can help, and how we're looking to deal with it ourselves at CFC in a bit of a unique way, which has been a massive benefit to thousands of our clients already. Now, kind of to go into this a bit further then, what are the cyber threats realistically? What are the threats that are causing the need for cyber insurance to be a thing in the first place? Now, as obviously Adam's been talking about, there is a lot of digital transformation going on at the moment for everyone across all markets, all sectors. Know that NHS is constantly looking at stuff. For example, at the moment, they're looking at developing new APIs, looking at MFA, looking at all those various aspects and projects at the moment going on, because unfortunately, the cyber market in terms of the cyber landscape for claims is constantly changing. Now, the one that stands out the most is probably the most damaging that we see is ransomware. You might be aware of that. Now, ransomware, for anyone who's not kind of quite 100% sure as to what that is essentially a type of kind of computer virus which locks you out of your computer, encrypts your data, and from what we're seeing, they can also steal your data as well and hold you to ransom. So essentially, they say we want X amount of Bitcoin or any sort of cryptocurrency, and if you don't pay it, we won't release systems, or we'll release your data as well on top of that. Now, this has been a massive problem since 2020. As you see, it's kind of continued in 2021, 2022, and 2023, and it's something that we are constantly keeping aware of. We do a lot of kind of research from our own data and from some of our partners we have at CFC. And it's still kind of continuing to be the main threat we're seeing. It's definitely the thing that kind of keeps up cyber insurers and people in the insurance market up at night. Is definitely ransomware still. And it's something that any business should really kind of think about. Now, let's have a look at kind of generally speaking. Now, what we have seen in generally speaking is the overall frequency of kind of cyber events is actually coming down, which is a good thing, right? So we saw back in 2018, 2019, 2020, there was kind of really was a kind of a high level of frequency, and that was kind of mainly because crime, as we'll see shortly, is really starting to shift into a cyber format, and it's kind of seen a big change. But as people's maturity and people's understanding, as Adam's talking about, people are doing the digital transformations, understanding their cyber exposure, controls are getting better. People are getting a more kind of considering that this is a real issue to the business and their operations, which it is. Plus, as well, that there is a line here for the Russia and Ukraine conflict, but the reason for this is there's actually a lot of groups which are linked or based out in the kind of those kind of territories, or allegedly, as I should probably say in inverted commas, in those areas. And as a result, what's actually happened is some of the main groups have split up. So one of the big groups was called Conti, for example, a ransomware group. They split up because of different ideologies within the group. So that actually meant there was actually a big decrease in ransomware events, for example. But also a lot of their efforts have actually been focused actually for that actual conflict. So there's a lot of actual cyber war going on between the two countries, which is actually then detracted away from what's going on elsewhere, whereas they would rather target a kind of country in the West. Then currently a lot of the focus for those nation state kind of sponsored groups, as it were, are heavily focused on this conflict. So it has seen a bit of a downturn. So, but while the frequency is down, the biggest concern, really, from our point of view, as we'll see in a second, is the severity of the claims are skyrocketing. And this is probably much more concerning in the sense that while cyber attacks are still kind of very high, I mean, the frequency, generally speaking, is that graph probably makes it look a little bit better than it is, but they're still not going away. But realistically, the severity of claims is only continuing to grow. So this is a graph from one of our partners we work with in relation to kind of ransom negotiations, if we ever have to go down that route. And Coveware have got data from a massive data set, even larger than our own, so they can kind of get a real idea and feel. But as you can see here, the average ransomware payments, so these are the actual payments, not even the demands, because quite often the demands are several times higher than what actually ends up being paid. These, as you can see, from 2018, back kind of when I kind of started doing cyber, for example, hopefully this is not a direct correlation between those two things, but realistically, you used to see kind of ransoms like kind of $500 or $1,000 in cryptocurrency, kind of real small amounts. So what we're seeing now, which is kind of regularly kind of in the hundreds of thousands of dollars in equivalent. Now, as you can imagine, that's that is purely for the ransom. That doesn't include any sort of damage to your systems. It doesn't include any sort of business interruption, increased cost of working. Doesn't cover any cost of any forensics, any legal costs, anything else that you need to go back on your feet. That is purely in relation to a payment of a ransom. And there's a few reasons why that's kind of happened and why we're seeing the change in severity. One of the things, as I mentioned earlier, was that they're stealing data. Now, what I mean by this is when they're undertaking the ransomware attack is they're not only kind of looking at your systems, quite often finding backups, for example, and either deleting or encrypting those too. They're also stealing the data and saying, well, if you don't then pay us the ransom, we'll also release this data. So they're hitting you with a double whammy, essentially. It's what we almost call, which is a bit of a weird one, but it's called double extortion. Essentially, you're being doubly extorted. One, you operate systems, but you also can't. You also got the potential of a data breach. Well, technically, you will have a data breach because the information quite often has been stolen. Now, we've actually seen quite an increasing number of these types of attacks, and because of that, because then these attacks are becoming more sophisticated, they're actually now starting to demand more money. As a result of that, because they know people do not want to have the issue of obviously having a data breach on top of an issue themselves, because as we talked about, they're getting more savvy in relation to people are getting more savvy in terms of cybersecurity, so that there's less ransomware attacks. They had to evolve their methods, and this is by one of the means they've done that is by kind of getting better at kind of being able to extort money out of people. So there is that aspect to it as well. Another reason we have seen a big uptick in ransom payment and ransom requests is that many of them actually will one look at people's financials and see how much money they've made, things on Companies House. You can go on there and find a lot of businesses' information from that, and they've been asking for a lot more money because of that. And second of all, they're starting to cotton on that people have got actually got policies. So people have actually got cyber policies with kind of amounts on there. I mean, at CFC now, we actually do encrypt our policy documents for our clients to kind of protect them any further. We're the first people to do that to help kind of protect the potential ransom demand on a business. But there are kind of hackers who will quite often actually find the insurance documents and ask for whatever cover they've got, and that asks for that limit. So we've actually taken steps to measure that. But this is the main real big issue is when they do happen, these cyber attacks now, they are very severe. We're talking hundreds of thousands of pounds. I mean, in the last month, I've looked at several of our clients. They've had well in excess of over £1 million in losses, and that's for really actual full-on small SME clients from various trade sectors as well. There's not one kind of sector which has been affected more than others. Now, if we look at kind of the frequency and claim side, obviously we talked about ransomware. Obviously, the actual frequency itself has gone down because it is becoming more difficult. But what we have then seen is actually a shift into more traditional means, as what I would say compared to what we were seeing back in kind of 2018, 2019 was what we call theft of funds. We might have heard it called as social engineering, essentially whereby third parties are tricking you into sending money to them instead of your intended recipient. So quite often if you're paying suppliers or sending money for any sort of means whatsoever, these guys are being able to infiltrate your own email inboxes, or maybe even if third parties requesting to change your bank details for you to pay money in. Now, the reason there's been a little bit more of a shift back towards that in terms of frequency, when that equates to about it's the most common claim we see now in terms of theft of funds. That's around 35% of all the claims we see, for example, is because they're still getting money. Quite often we're still seeing around kind of 20, 30, 40, 50,000 pounds are being sent in one transaction. And at the end of the day, these guys are all about making money. So while the ransomware might be more difficult now, but it could be more lucrative, there are some that are starting to shift towards this kind of theft of funds again, back like we were back in kind of the 2018 era, 2019 era, because it's actually easier at this moment in time to undertake these attacks, because you simply have to change things like invoice on an invoice. They manipulate it, change the bank details, and quite often people aren't kind of checking, or it's come from a legitimate email source. So it's Dave from your supplier, same email address, and it's genuinely his email account, but it's just a threat actor who's stolen his identity, stolen his account, and he's sent the email. So it does happen quite a lot. It's one of the most said it's 35% of all the claims we see, the most frequent of claims we see. To put it in perspective, kind of ransomware is about 30% of all the claims we see currently out there. So there is quite a big difference in relation to that. So I think like sanctions and stuff obviously affected that as well. But that's more of a US thing, so we won't get into that today. In terms of the types of cyber claims, right? So we were talking about kind of earlier on the shift and the change of landscape, and Adam was talking about earlier. There's been a massive shift in the way even crime itself has actually been undertaken, and this is kind of alluding to why we're starting to see these shifts. Now, kind of over the last few years, these are the stats from the ONS here in the UK. As you can see, kind of up to kind of 2013, 2014, they didn't actually used to include cybercrime, and someone decided, oh, well, crime's looking really good. Our crime stats generally each year are going down by millions, and the police were looking really great. And they said, oh, okay, well, we do start getting into a few like more cybercrime attacks. We probably should include those in the numbers. And I probably wish they probably didn't these days. Because as you can see, there's more crime than ever. Because actually what's happening is there's been a massive shift from traditional means of crime moving into cybercrime. And there's a combination of factors for this realistically. But gone are the days really, so if you really want some money and want to make some big money, you're not going to walk down the post office with a balaclava and a shotgun anymore. It's not really kind of the best way about going things when you can quite easily sit on your sofa and make hundreds of thousands of pounds doing ransomware, as you can see. I mean, you can even get kind of ransomware kits on the dark web for like 300 quid. So not trying that I should encourage anyone to do this type of thing, but it is incredibly easy to get into as well these days. But not only that, as most things were organised, so a lot of organised crime now has actually been kind of swapping methods from far more risky means of undertaking attacks. And also finding this is another method to launder money as well by undertaking cyber crime. So there's been a big shift. There's a lot of organised groups are now employing IT experts and people who are from the cybersecurity backgrounds because they've got the ability to also perpetuate these attacks, which obviously has led to actually, generally speaking, an increase of crime on top of what we're seeing. So, let's see if the stats on the last few years, that is millions of attacks. Because these cases are in millions of attacks. So as you can see here, that's 6.4 million in the last year of cyber crime attacks. So there's a significant amount of happening every single day in the UK. But yeah, from the really small phone call, someone pretending to be someone, up to kind of the full-scale ransomware attacks, what we're talking about today. Why is this? Like, what we need to really kind of think about and discover is really think about why these are happening. I mean, it really kind of boils down to these three key points. One, it's incredibly easy for them to do. These are all cybersecurity experts. They've all got years of experience. A lot of them now have been doing it for kind of 10 years plus. I mean, and as you'd imagine, if you're doing something for over 10 years, you'd hope you'd be relatively good at it by that point. And obviously, as that's kind of gone on, the longer they've done it for, the more kind of specialists they've got, the more sophisticated they've got. As I've said, they've become more organised, and they've actually they can almost pull their resources together, especially when they're receiving obviously the amount of money they are. A lot of that resources can then go back into the kind of running that business essentially, because they will essentially run it like a business. As I said, it's incredibly safe for them. When was the last time you ever heard of a hacker actually getting caught? It's few and far between. Like I said, gone are the days you're going to kind of walk into a post office with a shotgun or try and actually rob someone, because you're likely to get caught. You're probably going to get shot from the police. All this type of thing now. It's easy to do. It's a kind of a faceless crime in the sense that it's incredibly safe to do. It's very, very hard to find people, and even when they do, quite often they're living in countries that are well outside the UK anyway, or an extradition free, for example. So they're living in relative safety. So there's more shift going towards it because it's like anything, it's crime. You want it to be safe. And the key point really probably is how lucrative it is. Now, if you're doing crime, the idea is you want to make money. And as you can see, cybercrime is incredibly lucrative. If you're looking at just the ransom payments these guys could potentially get from one ransomware event, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure I could live pretty comfortable on 200 grand every other week. So, I mean, the combination of these three factors just mean it's becoming increasingly easy, safe, and lucrative for these criminals to do it. And that's why they've got no scruples about who they actually will target. When I first started to kind of doing cyber a few years ago, it almost was a bit more of an unwritten rule, that kind of things like healthcare and education and charities, that type of thing, didn't used to be hit. Even those rules seem to have those unwritten rules seem to have gone out the window for a lot of groups. They really do not care who they target. And quite often you'll find that people are actually unintentional victims or collateral damage, essentially, for attacks they're looking to undertake. There's been cases in the past where ransomware has actually ended up affecting multiple other businesses off the back of an intended victim. And as a result, you might sit there and think, oh, when it's a small entity, it won't happen to me. But what we're actually finding is kind of more so that these attacks can happen to literally anyone of any size. I mean, one of the biggest claims that we saw the last kind of couple of years was over £1 million. It was for a company that was only 400,000 in turnover, for example. Now that's pretty kind of goes to show that any business of any size can have an issue. And luckily, these guys actually did have like £1 million limit, did buy cyber themselves, so that was a big benefit. So they were covered, but otherwise that business would have folded and wouldn't be able to kind of still be operating now. And I can confirm they are still operating now, even after a couple of years after as well, which is another great benefit. So kind of a couple of reasons why they find it easy. Actually, I have a quick segue. Has anyone got any questions at this moment in time? Is there anything on there at all, Adam? We're looking good. Any questions at all?
Apologies, my mouse gave up on me then. No,
right.
there's nothing in the chat. I don't know if you'll be coming back to this in a minute, but you mentioned about the encrypted policies.
Yeah.
But what is it that cyber criminals are doing around the policies? I thought
so
it was
what they're doing.
point.
Yeah, so essentially what they're doing is they're actually able to find, like, quite often they're PDFs on your computer, and quite often people will just save them on their system somewhere, so they've got them to hand when they need them, and they find them basically, and they will use them because in a cyber policy you have a limit for the maximum ransom you can pay. These guys will just find out what the limit is, and then just ask for that limit basically, because they're like, well, you've got to cover up to this, so we know that the insurer can pay it basically. So they're basically starting to do that. So we've basically started to encrypt them to try and reduce that potential from happening. Obviously, the cover's still there, but the idea is if we encrypt it, they obviously can't do it unless they've got the encryption key, which we give once to the client via our app that I'll talk about in a bit, and the broker also has a code as well that we give those. So there should only be those guys who can actually read what's on the policy documents to try and protect them a little bit more, and hopefully reduce any potential impact as well. Because sometimes we have found that they've been in the systems ransomware attack, and what if they can find that document, they probably makes you a little bit more susceptible potentially if they can see what's on there. So the idea is we're trying to reduce the potential of people being targeted, but also the potential of them actually trying to undertake a ransomware attack as well. That's the plan. So yeah, one of the things we're doing, no one else is doing that at the moment. I'm sure there'll be changes that I'm sure other people will start doing that. We tend to be quite market leaders with things like this, so I'd imagine there'll be a big shift over the next few months of more insurers doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
To be honest with you.
So it's almost you're sort of giving them the right amount to pitch for when they're putting it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's what we want. That's what we want to avoid. So we've taken practical steps to change that. And that's actually, we're already kind of paying. We reckon quite a bit of dividends already. So it's very, very simple to do, and it doesn't really affect other people. Really, it's very easy to get the key and read your documents if you need it. So yeah, nice and easy in that sense.
Oh, thanks for that. Thank you.
Cool, that's right, no worries. Right, so as we move on, obviously looking into kind of why some of the reasons it's easy are one of the main things we still see, even in the era where people have multi-factor authentication, like MFA. For those who aren't aware of what MFA is essentially where you put a username, password in, and then you put a code in, or which kind of gives you a multiple. This is where your multi-authentication comes in. And the idea being that it's meant to be more secure because only you would have that code or the app on your phone, for example, to allow access. But unfortunately, we still see a lot of kind of passwords that it's only password and usernames used, and that's actually a very easy way for them to kind of get in. Now, you'd be surprised the amount of kind of people's usernames and passwords are actually out there on the dark web. As you can see here, you can get a nice cheap Netflix account if anyone wants to save a few quid, everything. But I don't know about you. I'm pretty sure I'm probably exactly the same. I've probably used the same passwords of multiple different accounts. And likewise, people quite often use the same things for their Netflix account or PayPal, and as they do for their work email account. Now, what people can do very easily these days is use things like LinkedIn, find a person's name, find out who they work for, find their email address, and then obviously they just go from the passwords they found on the line, see if they're similar to anything else they've got. Or alternatively, we've even seen them use software where it uses the top 10,000 passwords or most commonly used ones. You'll be surprised how many people's passwords are in the top 10,000. And as a result, they are able to actually gain access to your network. And then from there, they can obviously do attacks, social engineering attacks, the social engineer people, just be a pain in the arse generally by trying to find that information. Sometimes even if you stop them before they deploy those, they still might have had access or stolen data off your system just to kind of if they were preparing to do a ransomware attack. So once they're in, they can pretty much do what they want to do, and it's sometimes very hard to find it. So weak passwords is a real area to really think about. As we talked about, multi-factor authentication is good. It does help reduce that potential issue around this. But we are starting to see hackers also being able to circumnavigate that now as well to some extent. So we are having to keep them aware that it isn't the silver bullet that's going to stop everything for them to be able to remotely access your devices and networks, but it will at least make it a lot more difficult for them to do so. And that's kind of the key point, is try and make things as difficult for them as they can, quite often because they're looking for the low-hanging fruit. Essentially, there's plenty of people out there who haven't got those kind of levels of security in there, so they'll just go after those instead quite often. There's no point kind of trying to smash down the wall if the door's open down the road, if you know what I'm saying. So obviously these are actually some examples of some passwords that were hacked over the last kind of like 12 months. You'll be surprised about people who still use things like insurance and password 1234. So please don't use things like that. Please use some mildly complex ones if you don't already, because you'll be surprised, as I said, that how many people are in the top 10,000 still. So yeah, do bear that in mind. Slide. There we go. One of the other things we see a lot of is kind of a lack of employee training or lack of awareness, even if the training is done. So what we have seen, especially during COVID, there was a big spate of this because they were basically preying on people's kind of heightened tension around kind of the coronavirus pandemic, and people were sending out emails all the time about how to protect yourself, and that's kind of now stretches out even now into various different methods, but essentially they're very good at kind of, as I said, making sophisticated attacks and being able to kind of really lure people into kind of clicking on links or kind of trusting this from a legitimate source, kind of falling for various emails or clicking on links. There's so many different things you can do. I mean, even like an attachment such as this could now, if you clicked on that to open it, could actually download ransomware and deploy it on your system. We see that quite regularly. We've even seen it whereby employees have clicked on what looks to be a normal Word document, and then you open it up. It says enable macros to read it, and they do that, and also then downloads the ransomware. So there's loads of different methods of doing it. I mean, we've even seen down to something as simple as saying, "Oh, here's a free Costa coffee," and you click on the link to get to it, and then you put in like you some basic information without realizing you've actually put in your username and your password and all this other stuff, and they've actually just copied all of it. So I mean, who doesn't like free stuff, right? So people just kind of get quite easy to get lured in. And likewise as well, what we have seen is even things such as people falling for hackers who have actually been able to get into someone's email account, and they've even spent a couple of weeks just learning how that person speaks or emails. So if they've got people's nicknames, for example, if they're looking at people like a junior person in the account's name, because they might be able to see from the LinkedIn how long they've been in that position for, how long they've got, how much experience they've got. They could pretend to be like the CFO, CEO, or a senior member of staff. They could be called, like, you've got someone called Sophie called Soph, and they might tell me and go, "Okay, hi Soph, how you doing? Can you do this? I need this money sent over this afternoon. It's really urgent. Can you please do this?" Now, I don't know about you, but when I was kind of a junior member of staff, when you're starting out in work, quite often you'll go, "Yep, okay, my big boss is telling me what to do. You're just going to do it without any questions asked." You're not going to probably want to go back, and quite often that's how things like funds transfer fraud happens or social engineering happens. And quite often things being like email links and kind of those sort of things are the same thing. They prey on people's insecurities, or prey on the fact that people get busy and they don't always check every single email, or don't check every single email account, or check exactly if that's exactly the right email address, all these types of things. So employee awareness training is a really massive part. CFC do help with that. One of the services we provide is a phishing training simulation tool. So that's kind of really important and really does work. So that's kind of something that I would kind of really recommend. And there's loads of resources out there. I'm sure Adam's got loads of resources he can probably help point you in the right direction too. But there's loads of stuff out there that can be really, really helpful. And there's actually loads of free stuff in the government starting to do in relation to that as well. So by all means, have a look out there for those types of things too. One of the biggest shifts we've seen over the last few kind of last 12 months or so, 12, 18 months, is what we call vulnerability exploitation. or what can be called zero-day vulnerabilities. So in absolute layman's terms, what this means is in any sort of software, there's a potential backdoor which can be used by hackers to get into a system. Now, a prime example of how this could potentially work is I'm sure everyone gets the updates on their phone that come through. I'm pretty sure probably no one ever reads what's actually on those patch notes, but the main bullet point and the top one is always security. But what's happened is that'll be kind of Samsung or Apple or whoever you've got your phone with. They've basically identified normally a security flaw in their coding, which then could be used to be a backdoor into the systems. Now, this can be anyone. This can be any sort of business. I mean, for example, it was only about 3-4 weeks ago that Microsoft themselves had a massive issue with Outlook. There's a massive vulnerability. They actually released a really massive bit of information and released a patch because there was a huge security flaw that they found that hackers was actually starting to exploit. Now, these exploitations is almost like an arms race where they've got these hackers are finding it, and people like Microsoft and Apple and other kind of manufacturers are trying to find ways to patch it and kind of fill those holes before they're able to use them. Now, why these are important is they can actually bypass all the security methods you've got. So even if you have the best security in the world, these can actually then be exploited, allow you access to the systems, and again, they can do ransomware, they can do whatever type of attack they want to do. Steal your data. Now, obviously, what we're trying to highlight here is one, even with the best IT security in the world, the constant changing of updating the software can potentially lead to vulnerabilities that can be found. And even if you look at this from a snapshot point of view, you might be fine one week, but then next week there's a vulnerability in your system. So even if you spend millions and millions of pounds on your IT security, there's no guarantee that these guys won't get in. If they really want to, they will find a way. Unfortunately, that is how it is. But be that by preying on individuals and from from the human error point of view. And I forgot to say actually, on the human error point of view, 76% of all our claims come from human error as well. So it's not even from security issues. It's 76% of all the claims we see actually have a human error element to it. So it's an important thing. But in terms of vulnerability exploitation, it is an increasing amount of what we're starting to see, because as we discussed earlier in the presentation, the sophistication of people's cybersecurity and awareness is getting better. They've got to find new and kind of newer techniques to do so. So there's been a big shift in how we actually see cyber threats. Now, this is a graph kind of just show you where some vectors of attack come from ransomware. Obviously, that's the big baddie. If you want to think about the one thing that's going to really affect the business. Now, as you see here, RDP compromise, that's essentially remote desktop protocol, or basically how you remotely log into your network. That's the simple. So if I work from home, you quite often they use RDP as a method to do that. Now, from 2018 to now, you'll find a lot of people have got MFA, as we talked about, being in place. That's obviously reduce that potential as a vector of attack quite significantly. A lot of people use things kind of VPNs as well to kind of protect that access to, which does have a benefit, but obviously if they get username and password, they can still get in. But that has been a big downshift in a vector attack, and that is how some of the sophistication and people's awareness has reduced that vector. But as we can see, just because that vector's gone down doesn't mean they haven't found other methods in the meantime to do it. So as you can see here, email phishing is now the main one. As we talked about, human error is the biggest factor in any sort of cyber claim, and obviously that's why we're starting to see the shift of back to things like social engineering being the most frequently driven. Likewise, ransomware attacks are now still the most common way of them getting in is from email phishing. So clicking on links, clicking on attachments, people falling for going onto websites because they've been asked to look at it, for example, all these types of things. They're finding new ways. And as you can see here, we've also got kind of software vulnerability on there as well, which has obviously grown dramatically since 2018 because it's had to. And that can be various other means. So that can be weird and wonderful ways that we haven't even thought of. So quite often there's always kind of new ones that kind of spring up and go back down again. I could spend probably about 3 hours talking about that, but we won't. But I mean, as you can see here, the levels and the shifting landscape, as you can see here, this is a real shift in landscape and how it evolves over time. You can see the real peaks and troughs of how things change. And that's kind of how the cyber landscape is going to continue to be. There's always going to be peaks and troughs in terms of how people are undertaking attacks. There's always going to be that threat there. But while the overall frequency might be down slightly, the severity is what is the main concern. And for any business, that's what you really got to think about as being your primary concern, is how can I get myself back on our feet if one of these attacks has happened? Who's going to deal with it for me? How do I know how to deal with it? And have I got the resource to deal with it? And that's the real big thing to really kind of consider when you're looking at cyber and maybe looking into maybe insurance as a result of that, which obviously I would biasly obviously say is a really important thing. But it's not just because of an insurance point of view. There's actually a lot of the services we provide too. So I'll go into kind of what some of an actual case study that we dealt with at CFC, which I hope you'll find really helpful. Now, as you can see here, in terms of the costs incurred, this wasn't a massive loss. Now, I could sit here and scare you, I'm sure, for ages about a claim that was £1 or £2 million, and they do happen. But what I want to show you here is how we actually dealt with an incident and how much having a proper kind of insurance policy can actually benefit you guys as a client, for example, and how we can deal with incidents, kind of give you a bit of peace of mind, and how well we can kind of manage that exposure. Now, this was a small kind of care facility, care provider. This was an absolute classic of phishing emails we've been talking about. It was very much a link or an attachment with a Word document. It supposedly come from a supplier basically to pay an invoice. They opened it up and they were prompted to enable macro so they can actually review the content properly. So as you do, you go, okay, yeah, open it up. And as always, ransomware was downloaded and the hacker basically waited to the weekend, and then they was able to deploy it fully because they was able to gain access off the back of the content that was enabled on the document. So it comes around to Monday morning. Someone switched on the computer systems, and they found a message on the screen saying they'd been hacked. And there was ransomware on the screen, and there was actually a ransom demand of 195,000 had been requested. Now, as you can imagine, straight away, panic obviously ensues. They want 195,000 pounds. We're totally out of our systems. What do we do? Now, they obviously rung ourselves up straight away. We started asking them about bits and pieces, about kind of what happens, what can they see. And the one big plus point of this client is they had what we call offline backups. Now, what I mean by that is they have backups that are disconnected from their live environment, which means that the hackers can't physically access them. So because obviously all hacking is based done remotely, it's very, 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 very few, probably 0.0001% is actually done ever in person. So it's not like they have the movers where they kind of walk in with a laptop and plug it in. That doesn't really happen. So it's done remotely. So these guys can't physically get at the backups. They're usable. So what happened here, the client was actually then able to use the backups to restore their systems. So that was good. So they were able to do that. That took 4 days to do. So obviously that had an impact on the business straight away. So increased costs of working, bit of an interruption to the business as well. But obviously that's 4 days. So it's not the end of the world, but that is something to consider when you think about how long was it going to take the backups to get back and running. 4 days of increased cost of working plus all the additional kind of overtime costs that you might have to get extra employees to do extra things or recreate data that's lost. Quite often the data is still lost, even if you restore the base data, you have to get that done. And we still do see, even with backups, that systems are damaged and they have to be reinstalled, or new variants kind of have to be sorted out. So that's a plus point. They had backups and they were pretty much operational within 4 days. That was fine. The big issue for this client was the fact that they had actually threatened that they had exfiltrated the data or stolen the data, and they would release it. Now, at CFC, obviously, like I said, we've got hundreds of thousands of clients, especially with cyber. And in particular, we obviously receive thousands of claims every single year. Now, as a result, we actually knew that this hacking group was actually genuine to their word. They would release data. Were notorious for it, and we knew kind of where they would release it to. We looked into it and saw what data the hackers actually then had stolen. Now, we went through it, and we went through kind of what they had access to, and we determined that actually what they had in terms of data, luckily in this scenario, was actually only kind of names and addresses. So really basic information, something you can find on Facebook, to be perfectly honest with you. Like quite often your email address and your name is just on your Facebook account. It's not really hard to find. So actually, that's not a severe thing. You wouldn't have to worry about that. You don't even have to technically report that to the ISO because it wouldn't actually cause any potential impact on those individuals. Now, what we looked at and we advised our client, because we never tell the client what they should and shouldn't do in terms of paying ransoms, we advise them not to pay because essentially there's just a couple of aspects. One, the information that was actually exfiltrated was relatively benign. It's really basic information. And two, this group was probably going to release it regardless. So even if you paid the ransom, they were notorious for actually kind of releasing the data anyway. Now, the reason this is important and why I'm kind of highlighting this is because we had the expertise. One, that's saved the client potentially £195,000 of actually having to pay the ransom, and which obviously then in the end goal affects things like your policy agreement at the end of the year. Having expertise, so we don't want you to do anything which would be a negative to you guys anyway. And second of all, us having the expertise about knowing when to notify and if to notify and then how to notify is a massive aspect, which I think a lot of people kind of don't really determine. I think the first thing is when people have a data breach is to panic, notify everyone, notify the ICO, notify the care authorities, notify anyone they feel like they need to notify, when actually that's not the case when you look at the regulations. And even if you do need to do that, we have the expertise to be able to, one, put those reports together. We understand the time frame, so we know we've got a little bit of time to get a bit of information so that we can make a really detailed response. And as a result, we can honestly say that we've actually not had any fines levied against our clients as a result of us being able to do an incident. And what I mean by that is we put the report together, we tell them what's happened, we let them know how it's happened, we tell them how it's going to be rectified, and we tell them kind of how many people we think is affected and how we're going to deal with that. Quite often, the ICO in the UK managed data regulation, quite often we'll go, okay, it sounds like it's got it in hand. Obviously, make sure you sort your systems out. I can see that you've got remedials to do, and they normally close the book and file. If you get in a situation where you're kind of running in there with like a burning fire going, I've had a data breach, I don't know what's happened, I don't know how they've got in, I don't know what data they've stolen, I don't know how we're going to fix it, that's when they start asking questions. And all that's going to do is put additional stress onto you guys in an already very stressful situation whereby you've got a cyber event actually happening. So having that kind of, we project manage all that, we take all that kind of stress away and are able to actually manage that properly, and where you can actually see whether or not you even need to notify, which again is a bit of a reputation thing as well, because you have to notify individuals that can potentially affect your reputation, which we do cover. We actually cover reputational harm under our wording, for example. That isn't kind of something that's industry wide, but it's something we do provide. But we're actually trying to actively protect you guys from every kind of angle, from a data regulation point of view, from a reputation point of view, but also from a financial point of view as well. That's why I want to highlight that part in particular. Now, as we said, this ransom wasn't paid because obviously, as we said, we knew the knowledge, we knew they were going to release it anyway. It's benign, and it was relatively benign. So the ransom group did actually release the data, and they released it in the same place they always release it. But something again that I think we're pretty unique. I think we haven't heard of anyone else who's been able to do this. We actually contacted the file sharing site at CFC and was actually able to get that information taken down within 4 hours. So even though that information was technically like kind of breached out there, we was actually able to contact that file sharing site and say, look, this is stolen data. So from our client, there's been a ransomware attack. Look, we can prove there's been a ransomware attack and they've stolen it. Can you please take this down? And they took that down within 4 hours. Now, that is something that realistically, we have got probably enough weight and authorities to be able to request that. As an individual business, it's going to be very difficult to, one, even know that was going to happen, because you wouldn't probably know about the ransomware group in the first place, but two, wouldn't know how about going about actually putting it down. So that's just another added benefit of what we're actually able to do in terms of our expertise in being able to deal with a ransomware event of this kind of nature. Now, as I said, this could have been a lot worse. This could have included a lot of healthcare information. It could have been a lot of payment details, and obviously that could have really increased potential costs in the need to notify, etc., etc. But when it came down to it, the costs incurred here were actually only £61,000. Now, that's a big benefit in the sense that, yes, we've paid out £61,000, and obviously that is one cost you haven't got to pay. But if you was going to do that independently, this would have cost well over £100,000 easily, just for the forensics costs and the legal costs, because realistically we do all this actually in-house here at CFC. So we've got legal expertise, we've got access to law firms as well, where we've got our retainers, which are still not cheap, as you can imagine, because they're lawyers, but it's still a lot cheaper than what it'd be for the kind of a general kind of public to kind of access. And also we do a lot of our forensics in-house, which brings our costs down. Now, how does this benefit our clients? Well, if our claims costs are down, it means our premiums can stay lower. and that obviously that has a massive impact on you guys. You guys that aren't going to want to have a cyber claim and then have to pay 5 times more than you did the previous year. Now, by us being able to do a lot more work like this and actually have the expertise, that, like I said, that reduces our costs, and obviously that generally means that all of our claims are a lot lower than probably some of our competitors, allowing us to provide a cheaper product with at the same kind of breadth of coverage that we're offering out there in the market at the moment. And that's why, as well as being able to really help you out that really stressful, horrible time, and kind of really walking you through the entire process, we're actually able to keep you kind of the possibility to actually be able to afford to be able to favour cyber going forward as well. So that's kind of the kind of a case study I really want to kind of explain to you about what our capabilities are when it comes to claims. I'm going to take a real quick pause there. Has anyone got any questions at all in relation to anything we've gone over so far, or the example or anything like that at all?
We do, Matt. We have Andy in the chat has asked about this case study.
Mhm.
What kind of backups did that care provider have?
So they literally just had tape backups that were just at the end of the night. Once it was done, they automatically disconnected. So I don't know the specific type, the brand of it, but I think they had kind of like it's basically a tape deck. Tape deck, not tape deck. What was it? 1990s. Tape. Kind of a disc. And there was a program set up so that it was like the shut off. It just basically shuts off the access each night and just totally disconnects. You can get cloud backups. I'm sure there's lots of people who use cloud backups these days. We've got no issues with those, and they're still very good. One thing we would say to those is make sure that they're protected with multi-factor authentication for your access. The reason being is hackers quite often will find that you've got cloud backups, especially if you're using cloud services. They'll find them and either delete them or encrypt them quite often. So restricting that access to using MFA is something we always recommend if you are going to use cloud backups, which again, we are starting to see a lot more businesses using cloud providers. That's not an issue. It's just making sure they're secure like anything else, so that if there is a ransomware event, they're actually accessible, because there's no point in having cloud backups if you can't actually get access to them, because they're pretty useless then. Yeah, that's basically how we do that one.
Real. Did that answer that, Andy? Was that good? I'm looking, but I can't see anyone on my screen at the moment.
No, that's right. Just let me know. Also, come on board.
Oh, yeah, we got a thanks. Okay.
No worries at all. Thank you. It's a good question as well. So definitely something to consider. Backups are a really, really important thing to help us deal with ransomware. So definitely something to have a look at. But yeah, I can talk about some bits like that in a little bit if needs be as well. Okay, cool. So next part, where are we on? So we've talked about we've talked about a few things today. I just wanted to kind of highlight a few points. So these are some of the common objections that we hear quite often. We hear things like, oh, we're too small and we don't collect data, or we invest in IT, we're not responsible. But as you can see, as going through this presentation, these really kind of aren't kind of real arguments in relation to cyber, kind of protecting your business. They will affect any business. As I said, we had an example where a £400,000 company had over £1 million attack. Quite often you're not an intended target, or you'll just collateral damage quite often as well. There doesn't have to necessarily be a target attack for you to be affected. So they're not really fussed about who they target, as long as they can get some form of money out of you. Even if you don't collect any data at all, it's not all about data. Because if your systems go down, you've still got system damage to deal with. You've still got an interruption to your business. You've still got the cost to deal with that incident. And as I said, even a basic ransomware attack can quite easily run into hundreds of thousands just from doing those kind of basic things if your systems go down. So regardless of any third-party liability, you still got that exposure. And at the end of the day, I'm sure everyone's got cyber crime, because everyone transfers money pretty much electronically. I think let's be honest, money essentially now is in space. I don't think it actually exists anymore. I can't remember the last time I had a cash in my wallet, to be honest with you. So I think that kind of highlights how much money is transferred these days, and hackers will find ways. And as I said, they're getting more and more sophisticated to actually be able to transfer that transferred money. As we've highlighted as well, you might invest in IT, and that's great. And we never say that's a negative, but it doesn't mean that you're kind of protected fully from any sort of cyber event. As you can see, as we talked about, kind of human error is a massive part of that. Unfortunately, people being people, we make mistakes. We've even seen some top kind of IT professionals make mistakes in the past, because everyone has bad days. So don't kind of ever discount the fact that it can really happen to anyone. It could be human error, it could be vulnerability exploitation. It could be anything that could really kind of still bypass systems. We write kind of clients up into the billions here at CFC. Those guys spend millions and millions of pounds a year. They still have cyber events. So just because you invest in IT doesn't mean that you're less susceptible to having a cyber event at all. There's always a way. If they want to get in, they will find a way. And then lastly, people say kind of, oh, we're not responsible. We outsource our IT. Unfortunately, you're still going to be liable. The way that the regs are these days, you're still responsible for that data. If the data has been given to you in the first place, you're still the data controller. So even if it was with an IT supplier or you've got a cloud provider, I mean, Blackboard, for example, a few years ago was a prime example. They host a lot of charities, education, for example. They had a data breach where they held loads of third people's data. We had loads of clients, I think about 70 clients who were affected by that. As a result, they are still responsible for that data, regardless of how they use it. And we do cover them, even if a third party is holding that data, if it's an IT supplier. So we still provide that coverage for you, but you are still susceptible to that. You can't offset your exposure in that sense. And even if you have some kind of like contracts or ways of subrogation, quite often the contracts are very, very limited. They're not going to cover you for any real damage. They might cover you like a few £1,000 at most, maybe up to the delivery contract. But quite often as well, they're not going to provide the full coverage that you're going to go into a cyber policy. They're not going to pay for your full forensics, or they're not going to pay for legal costs. They're not going to pay for system damage. They're not going to pay for your business interruption. They're just going to pay for the real basic minimum that they can get away with, essentially. So you're not really protected under those contracts that well. They're always going to be in favour of those IT firms, unfortunately. Now, just kind of how I was talked about what we're doing at CFC and where we're kind of the real market leaders and how are your digital fire engine, which is a phrase I absolutely detest, but we'll have to use it because it's marketing. But we'll go on from there. But we've actually got a lot of expertise here at CFC, and what we're offering is not just a product, it's actually a full service as well. And what I mean by that is we're providing obviously, as we talked about this response, we have CFC Response is our in-house team. We've actually got close to, this is over 100, but it's actually close to over 150 cyber specialists just dealing with claims. We're dealing with well over 2,000 a year now, 24/7 response, because we've got a team in Texas, in America, team in the Gold Coast, Australia, and one here in London. So even if you guys are running 24/7, 365, you've always got access to people at CFC, proper CFC people. We're not going to outsource any of those hours. We're actually going to pick up the phone. You're going to speak to someone here. And then if it was, say, 5 o'clock on a Friday, we got that phone call, we'd pass you over to our colleagues in America so that they can keep working on it for you. So that you're getting actively looked at. We're not going to say, okay, see you later, it's Monday, we'll speak to you Monday. You're actually going to have full expertise. We've won multiple awards for our services. And as I said, we do all this in-house, and we're building out more and more capabilities as well. We do have third-party providers we can use if needs be, if there's kind of a lot of claims going on simultaneously, or if we need an extra pair of hands to do certain aspects. But we are starting to do more and more in-house, and we're hiring more and more people to kind of, again, to make sure that we're managing it in-house, so we're not outsourcing, which it can be stressful as well, because we're essentially going to project manage the whole thing then for you to avoid you having to worry about having to do with legal and PR and forensics. It's already a stressful situation. We're going to try and take as much of that off you as we can. One of the other things we do a lot of is via our app. So there's a lot more services that we provide here. So one, obviously for the app, it's called the Instant Response app. And one of the things you can do is notify us of cyber incidents. It's quite handy, in particular if people have ransomware attacks. Quite often their policy documents or the contact details are on the computers. So if it's encrypted and you can't get to it, you can't find it. Luckily, the app has all the phone numbers, and you can just report the incident. You might be able to see on top of that kind of diagram there, it says report new incident. Just click on that, and you actually get a call back. No later than half an hour, but generally speaking, it's around 15 minutes before you get a call back from one of us in the CFC Incident Response team. So you've also got access to cybersecurity experts for advice at any time. There's an Ask the Expert function on here. So you guys have had any questions at all in relation to cybersecurity, things like backups, Sandy asked earlier, you can go there and directly ask our cyber specialists, and they can give you some real good advice about various aspects. That could be an instant response plan for cyber, backups, MFA, anything like that. Really, really good tool, criminally underused, I think, as well, to have that level of access. Quite often IT firms are love to charge people for even basic advice. So we're giving that free as part of our policy to kind of help you guys. We also provide a lot of risk management cybersecurity tools. Now, how we do that is, one, we have our phishing simulation tool. So we talked about how employee awareness and training is a key aspect. What we're actually able to do is, if we find any kind of potential usernames or passwords out there on the dark web, from doing some of the dark web scanning, which is another tool we use to see if there's any breach data, which we would then deal with if there was any breach data. We can actually do a phishing simulation on some of your employees sporadically throughout the year based on information we might find, or those we feel are much more likely to be targeted, and try and keep them on their toes. And then also we can feed that back to you, which obviously is a really good way of just kind of keep people on toes, keep testing people, just to make sure that they're aware of what things to click on. They're very, very good. They look very legit as well. Our threat analysis team that run this are a lot of them are geniuses when it comes to cyber. Like, they're on the good side, luckily, rather than the dark side. But they've set up some really, really good emails and kind of things to try and catch people out. And they do occasionally do that, but it's there to be used as a real good learning tool. Okay. As we said, we do a lot of dark web scanning. We also do some vulnerability scanning as well. So we do some of the same scans and checks that hackers do. We've built our own kind of scanners. So if there's, for example, a certain vulnerability, we'd find out about that and we find a way to scan for it. Those are non-intrusive. Quite often it's literally just being able to scan on your software, which is externally facing on the internet. For example, you might be able to see it's version 2.1, but the patch one, which wouldn't allow the access, would be version 2.2. So we can see, okay, we've identified this. You might want to update your software here, because obviously there's a vulnerability that you guys could be potentially be targeted to use. So that's something that we do as well. But probably the most important aspect, and I'm going to go into this in a little more detail on the next slide as well, is actually our proactive cyber and our real-time threat intelligence. Now, what I mean by this, and I'll kind of go into the next slide because it's probably easier to explain a bit more detail in terms of threat intelligence, is we're actually getting kind of well over 10,000 threat intelligence feeds weekly. Now, this information comes from government sources, private sector sources, and proprietary sources. And what we're actually able to do is find out whether or not some of our clients are actually going to be targeted potentially from attacks. An example of this is it was 5 weeks ago. We've got I said our threat analysis team who are a bit of experts, headed up by Tom Bennett, who is a genius. He used to work for the police for a lot in their cyber team for a number of years. We've got relationships with like the NSA and other government agencies out in the US as well. The NSA actually was able to find out information of a list of clients that were going to be targeted with phishing emails, like targeted phishing emails. We went through a list, and in the UK we discovered that 770 of our clients were on this list. Now, what we was actually able to do is we was actually then able to contact all of our clients and tell them before this attack had even happened, protecting them from actually having the attack happen in the first place. Now, this is something that we're kind of offering at CFC, like a service which is, technically, if you're going to try and build this other team into a company, it would cost over £1 million a year to actually run it. We're throwing kind of putting this into what we're offering by protecting our clients as much as possible. Now, we get this information, we would find out if anyone's going to be affected, like I said, and then we would actually find solutions to help protect you. In that scenario I've just given you, where we had the 770 clients, what we actually was able to do is identified that in the email there was something in there which noted it was like a version 1 or version 2 that the hackers were using to kind of track how successful they were. We was actually able to inform clients of how to put on their email filtering to put those keywords in and actually stop the emails from even hitting people's inboxes. Now, as I said, though this type of prevention is so much better than cure, we've got fantastic claim services to deal with those. But if we can actually stop our clients from having claims, that's a much bigger benefit. Now, there are companies out there at the moment who are offering this service for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 pounds. We're including this for free as part of our offering in terms of our insurance product. So not only have you got the insurance itself and the claim services to help manage your claims as we went through today, we're actively going to try and protect our clients as much as possible. We've helped kind of well over 15,000 of our clients already. We've been able to We've sent out loads of information via the app and via email about potential issues we've seen. So any, so for example, the Outlook issue that came out, we sent out loads of confirmation or information, sorry, about that via the app and via email to our clients to try and keep them ahead of that and try and get that patched out. But having that intelligence actually allows us to really protect you guys as a business as much as we possibly can to try and stop as many attacks in the first place. Obviously, prevention is always better than cure. So obviously that's why we spend a lot of time and a lot of our resources into try and protect you guys as well from cyber events, to work hand in hand with your cyber security. We're not trying to overtake and say that anyone's doing a poor job. What we're trying to say is we're trying to be an extra tool and an extra string to your guys' bow, so that you've got something to really kind of protect yourselves as a business. And I think that's something we are kind of uniquely offering in the market. No one else is offering that level of service as part of the product at all. It's all down to the real basic stuff, such as the vulnerability scanning and stuff other people are doing. So that's it from me. Has anyone got any questions? I know there's a lot of information in the last hour. I'm fully aware. So if anyone's got any questions, please do feel free to ask them now. There's no silly questions, only stupid answers, as I like to say as well.
We do have one in the chat, or a couple more coming through in the chat, but I just wanted to sort of just comment really. I think that seeing what CFC offers, as part of your support and those tools, I think this call for me it's really useful, because when we're thinking about our own requirements, what would really support me in my role as a cyber lead, what would I need, and how could my cyber insurance offer support me? I think that's really interesting when we're building our own requirements to actually reflect on that and to hear essentially of offering like a gold standard. That's cracking.
Yeah, no, I think that's the kind of idea. Well, also, what we're trying to do is provide as much information for you guys to make your own decisions as well as a business. We're not trying to force loads of things onto you as well. We're just trying to help out where we can. As I said, we've got a unique position. We've got all these relationships. We've got all this intelligence that we pay a lot of money for each year. But obviously, that means that we can help all of our clients. And it doesn't matter how many there are. We've still got the capabilities, and we're building those out, hiring more people, spending more and more time finding ways that we can protect them in whatever way we need to see fit. So don't get me wrong, so things still slip through the cracks and claims still happen, obviously, but if we can kind of protect you as much as possible, that's always the best thing we can do. That's from my point of view.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. I think it's been really, well, I said it would be one to have a lot of takeaways from, and it certainly is.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. No, that's cool. There's a couple of questions.
From the chat, we've got Sam, he was talking about the common objection slide that you put up, and just reflect on that about third-party attacks, or give us a headache, which is a bit of an understatement considering you mentioned the advanced systems attack last year.
Yeah.
But what is your approach to these?
I mean, it all depends what type of attacks you mean, Sam. What type of attacks in particular you're looking at, and kind of like how they're getting in. Is there a little bit more you can boil into that? So I've got a bit more of a specific answer I can give you. I mean, I'll probably give you an answer. I just want to know exactly. I'd rather tailor it rather than go on a 10-minute tangent.
Feel free to come off mute, Sam.
Yeah. You can hear me okay, yeah?
Yeah, lovely, Sam. Yeah.
It was just obviously specifically, well, not specifically, but around the advanced one. Obviously, it's a system that we use. Our IT providers are, we have two separate IT providers, which are both local authority based. But that was obviously a third party. Now, that obviously affected our systems, our processes. The staff plan was out for months, and things like that. So it's like, does the cover, do your what you do, would that apply to us?
Yeah, so
it wasn't our breach.
We still respond. So our coverage automatically covers any technology service like supply chain partners. So Advanced would be one of those. So how that would work in the sense of, while it's not your system, we can't physically do anything to the system, can't fix it in inverted commas as such, but what we can do is do all the other things around it. So if there was a breach at the back of that, we would deal with the breach. We would do all the things internally with your systems that we are physically able to. So if that involves, if you need PR, if you need some legal costs, if you need to do forensic investigations on your system that we can see, anything that we can actually actively do on that side, the policy would still react and the coverage would still be valid as per that. So while we might not be able to physically get you online straight away, for example, because of its advances down, we still react to the policy as a result. So there's nothing that's going to kick it out from that point of view. Does that kind of answer your question? Essentially, yeah. It's still covered. I mean, as I was saying earlier, more and more people are shifting to the cloud. So there's more and more cloud service providers are being used, which does also mean you kind of have that limited aspect of what you can and can't do. So there's a positive to it in that ideally they should be more reliable, and generally speaking they are, but we are starting to see hackers actively now target things like managed service providers who provide these services, because they know that they're going to affect potentially hundreds or thousands of clients, and then they actually hit those guys with ransomware instead. So we've had multiple clients affected by one attack, for example, from on a managed service provider. So it's something we are aware of, and we're something we still react to. So I mean, that's coverage we put as standard. We'll do as much as we can as per the policy offers, but obviously in terms of actually getting up and running, we'll try what we can, and we'll give them a big push as well. We try to use a bit of our clout to be able to kind of say, like, look what's going on, and try to bet. Obviously those guys have to get you back up and running, essentially, because it's not local in your systems. Otherwise we would be able to get you back up and running. But I think this is key, where maybe having things like an instant response plan and manual workarounds where possible are really important. I mean, we have, like I said, if you use the app, for example, you can actually speak to our cyber security experts, and they give you some really good templates and tools. And there are some other publicly available out there as well. But it's really good having those kind of plans in place to say, well, okay, if we are down or this does go down, how can we operate? What's the method? How do we escalate this if we're going to deal with this ourselves? If you've got cyber policy, obviously it's still good to have those in place, because then you know, okay, well, we're going to contact cyber insurer. In the meantime, we're going to do X, Y, Z, and we're going to do this manually, and we know how long it's going to take. So that also does take a lot of stress off of the situation too, we find, and it's a really good thing to do. Just run a quick test on those, kind of like maybe annually at least, and then yeah, definitely a thing I'd recommend as well as good backups, MFA as we talked about as well, but a good instant response plan. Our cyber security guys always recommend a really good plan in place, because it can make the whole process as a bit less painless. It's not going to reduce, it's not going to remove it, but it's going to reduce a little bit of pain.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hope that kind of answers your question, Sam.
Yes, fine, thank you.
No worries at all. Have you got any more questions while you're on this one before I go to the next one? All good?
Yeah,
all good.
All good from Sam. Yeah, so we've got one more in the chat from Andy, saying, are there any preset requirements for cyber insurance?
So at CFC, generally speaking, no. We don't have any warranties or conditions in our word to say you have to have X, Y, and Z in place. If you're kind of a much larger entity, we probably would look to see what cybersecurity you have got to make sure, because what we do find is a direct correlation between size and operation of a client and the potential impact, one, of a cyber event in the first place, but the potential what we would probably expect to see as a result. So while there's no warranty conditions about you have to have MFA, you have to have backups like this, or something we look at when we're looking at submissions. But generally speaking, with ourselves at the CFC, we haven't technically got any prerequisites. Obviously, Richard, who's on the call today, also works at Towergate. I'm sure he's obviously looked at cyber insurance, and they use us all the time, but I'm sure he's looked at others in the market in particular who do have some prerequisites. Things like MFA in particular are quite common out there in the market. That's correct, isn't it, Richard? Oh, you're on mute, Richard. I'm sure what you've said is great.
Of course I'm on mute. One of the challenges that we find for our social care clients is that they don't have necessarily the in-house IT spend to ensure they have a lot of the systems MFAs that CFC's competitors ask for. I've seen some of CFC's competitors deny claims because the latest security patches weren't in place.
Well, you've
got to have everything absolutely up to date, 100%, or you will find that some of CFC's competitors will just not pay the claim. So you spent thousands of pounds on a cyber policy, you come to make a claim, and because you haven't got patch 4.2.6.8,
yeah,
that's it, not covered. And it's clearly mentioned in the wording, and it's your responsibility because you didn't have it. And that's one of the benefits of working with CFC that I find. I'm not here to pitch for them, they're quite capable of doing that for themselves, Matt and his team. But what CFC would tend to do is pay the claim and then work with you to make sure that you've got those patches, and you've got a processing patch place to make sure that you've got that in, you've got those security updates automatically on your system. Would that be fair to say, Matt?
Yeah, sorry, Andy, you was going to say something as well then, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to over
No, don't be silly.
Richard. Well, I can actually vouch for that. I mean, in the last 2 years, we've actually lost one of our cyber assurance organisations because we didn't have EPP EDR. We were driven to have MFA, otherwise we would lose it, which was a good thing, not necessarily a bad thing. I have no issue with the ability for insurance to push along cyber hygiene right the way across the whole environment. What I do get a bit annoyed about, though, is they do it a month before you're due for renewal, or we see a 20% or 25% increase, which is what we saw last year in our payments. And I think that the cyber insurance companies are not helping themselves by making these large increases. There's nothing wrong with the imposing of certain preset criteria, but it would be good if they actually put out some warnings for people so that we at least have a chance to have something in place ready to go, rather than, I mean, to roll out a full BPP deployment takes months. It's not something you can pop in at the end of the month.
No, that's great.
And it makes it really frustrating. And a lot, I mean, particularly my organisation, we provide services to local authorities. The lack of, or the loss of cyber insurance could have an impact on our business, significantly impact on our business. So I'd like to see a bit more communication from the insurance companies, either through the brokers or.
To be honest, Andy, I don't disagree with you. Generally speaking, I think the last couple of years, in terms of premiums, it's kind of gone up basically in relation to what we're talking about, the severity of claims. So, I mean, generally speaking, the way insurance works, obviously, you need to make sure you've got enough pot of money to pay out the claims, right? So, obviously, generally speaking, the market did go up for a kind of what we call like a hardening market, they tend to call it, where pricing does go up. What we have found at CSE in particular is, generally speaking, most of our rates are actually stabilised now. For example, where we are, and what we are actually able to do now is quite a lot of our clients, there's not much changes. There's a lot more that are kind of basically paying the same they were last year, for example, now. So there is that kind of coming in. I mean, we were kind of communicating that to most of our clients last year, that letting our brokers know there is going to be some increased costs. As soon as these started to kind of come in, I think it's one of those things where sometimes it could be communicated better, but I think that always depends on people, brokers and insurers, and that can vary across the market wildly. So I totally appreciate that.
Do you know what I'd like to see? I know this might be a bit controversial. I'd like to see some no claims bonuses put in place for organisations that have good security hygiene, and where there's organisations that do have really good controls, they are taken into account, and we see discounts based on it. That's still not been incorporated into cyber insurance. I think it should be.
I think, it hasn't at the moment, but I think, as we were talking about earlier, it's really hard to kind of say what's good and what's not, because obviously what happens is, generally speaking, the evolution of cyber claims and where they're coming from is always evolving. So saying that you kind of have, and as we've shown as well, where we're having claims in certain aspects, or a vulnerability comes in, you guys could have great security. Vulnerability then gets identified. You do like, even if you do like patch management every 14 days or 7 days, you could get hit before that, and then you're in a situation where you go, okay, well, we've got really good security, gave a discount last year, and you still had a 500 grand loss this year. So it's kind of it's really hard to kind of say it's different.
I totally understand that argument. I totally understand that argument.
Yeah.
But not being funny, an insurance company charges an 18-year-old far more money to insure his car than a 60-year-old. If you're Cyber Essentials and you're audited by a third party, and you've got what would be classed as good enterprise level security, yes, of course, there's always going to be risks. That's the reason why we buy cyber insurance.
Yeah, of course.
So I can see your argument, but I'm not 100%
it's a little bit different. I mean, I think the difference as well is different products are different as well. Like I said, like the car insurance, for example, that's a totally different. It's totally different. Like every insurance product is underwritten totally separate, and cyber is a bit of a unique one in the sense that it's not what we tend to find. The only real kind of trend we tend to see, generally speaking, is the larger the entity, the larger the claim, and the more employees they've got, the more likely and the more severe the claims are. We've got, like I said, we're very unique at CSE. We've been doing cyber for over 20 years now, so we've probably got one of the biggest data sets out there in the market, full stop, in terms of claims and kind of what we're seeing in the environment. And even with that, it's so sporadic because the evolution of cyber is changing so rapidly. Whereas things like car claims, for example, and this is just using that as an example as we're talking about it, it's very easy to see those claims. It's the same thing year after year after year after year after year after year. It's very easy to go, well, it's mainly 18-year-olds. The last 25 years, load of new learners, loads of the guys that keep crashing their cars. It's different. Whereas cyber's like, well, okay, well, this sector was
I
hit
can
last
see
month.
that. I was being a bit disingenuous with it.
No, I know.
What I was trying to say is that I think if cyber insurance is going to develop as time moves on, it's going to have to move with the times a little bit and actually become a bit more accessible. Because if it keeps going the way it is at the moment, you're going to make yourself inaccessible to many of the smaller companies.
No, I don't.
We're already struggling, and we're a big charity, and we're already struggling to pay the premiums.
Yeah,
and I think if they, so I think that is something that the industry is going to have to consider.
And as I said, we are very conscious of that. But I think obviously from our point of view, I said obviously from a kind of CFC point of view, as I said, one thing is we've done is obviously we're spending a lot of money in obviously reducing our claims costs. We're doing more of it in house to offset that as well. Obviously, if we're more in house we can do, that means we're not having to spend loads more money on third party externals, which obviously increases claims costs at the end of the day, and that's why premiums go up. So we're actually doing something about that. We were actively kind of looking at kind of various things we can do. Obviously, if we can prevent claims in the first place, so we're spending loads of money to prevent things from happening in the first place, which then again, we've got more confidence in that. And as I said, rates generally for us have kind of stabilised as to where they are at the moment in time. I think the wider market might be a little bit different, but there is that with it. There was one more point I wanted to make as well. You talked about kind of implementing elements. I think one thing we're kind of quite good at CFC in particular is we try to work with our clients. So if it comes around to near a renewal time, we look at it and go, okay, well, they haven't got this in place. What we try to tend to do is, okay, what's the time scale for you to actually get this in place? And then we'll kind of work to that and kind of put like a risk management kind of timetable.
I wish mine would do the same. I wish mine would do the same, because that was the last thing I was going to moan about is the yes or no answering that you get back from many cyber insurers. It does make it difficult to explain. You know, the EPP one actually was a really good one, because we do have EPP and EDR across the network, but we have 2,000 Chromebooks, which means, you know, that doesn't work with EPP.
No, exactly.
So of course the word is all, and we don't have all, and they really picked up on that. You know, it's a lot of it's wording, but absolutely that does really have an impact on the ground, especially for small organisations. Yeah. Anyway, look, I've hogged an awful lot of this.
No, it's been a really good debate. It's good to have some good conversations with that. So thank you, Andy.
Richard has something to add there. So Richard, do you want to come?
Just one point that I was going to add. One of the things you do need to sort of be conscious of is making sure that whoever you're working with actually has an understanding of the unique nature of social care. For example, one of my favourite ones is one of the questions on the CFC application and other insurers' applications is, how many staff do you have? Because obviously the more staff you have, the more people have access to the network, so the more likely you are to have some sort of attack. However, in social care, you may have a large cohort of staff who have no or extremely limited access to the network. They certainly don't have access to any financials. They may only have access to, you know, their own training records or just the individuals that they're supporting's care plans. So what I always do as CFC is say to them, right, this client's got 500 staff. However, they've only got 10 who've got network access in terms of financials, and that can have an impact on the premium. So it's about making sure that you're giving the full picture, because obviously no insurer's application form is going to be bespoke to social care. So it's making sure that when you look at the question set, you're trying to sort of look behind that question and give them that extra bit of information that may make all the difference.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that's what we kind of use quite a lot of open text box as well, to kind of let people explain things as well where we can. Some things are yes and no, because do you have this, yes or no, because it is. But we tend to, even if some of those questions, even the yes or no ones, we tend to say, well, if no, or want to explain it a bit further, you can explain things to allow people to actually, like you said, Andy, explain things in a bit more detail and say, right, look, the context is this though, and you go, okay, well, take things with a pinch of salt then, rather than computer says no, which I think there's a lot of in the market still. But like I said, we are lucky in the sense that we've been doing this for a long time. We've got our underwriters, including myself, we purely write cyber. We don't write all load of different products, so we've got expertise in it. Obviously, we've got full kind of expertise from our incident response guys, our threat analysis team, all of which are cybersecurity experts as well. So we have got a fantastic resource here to be able to work with our clients as much as possible, to kind of work towards things if things aren't where they need to be. And that's obviously, as we've talked about as well, the requirements of the cybersecurity has evolved with the claims landscape. So that's kind of always going to be a shift. So that's why we're probably more readily working with our clients where possible, understanding that things aren't implemented in 2 weeks. It takes a lot of time to get things done.
And one other brief point that I would make, CFC have been doing it for 25 years, probably one of the oldest and most established providers in this sector. However, the general insurance market's been running for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. So, cyber is still evolving very, very rapidly because it's still and again, this is not an insult, but it sounds like an insulting word, quite an immature product still. It's still very, very new. And when the IT sector is constantly racing ahead, much faster than the warehousing sector, for example, or the motorist sector, forgetting driverless cars, it is constantly changing, and it's such a fast developing area that you need to be a specialist who actually understands it and can stay on top of it, because it's so tricky.
Oh, no, thank you. And just to follow up that, I don't think that was a moan. I think when you're reflecting back on what your offer is and what your experience is, it's never a moan. I think it's great to unpick that, and thank you, Matt and Richard, for your follow up on that.
No, that's fine. It was good to, like I said, it's good to have those kind of questions. I think it's always good for people to always push those things as well. There's absolutely no issue with that at all. Like we welcome things like that, because obviously it's something we're conscious of and we do think about a lot of. So it's good to have those types of questions. So I do appreciate that as well.
Definitely. I don't have any more questions in the chat, but if anybody wants to raise their hand now, I'll give you a second to speak now, or forever hold your peace.
Also, if anyone does have any questions, feel free to ask Adam or Richard.
Yes.
I'm sure they can help you guys out. And as well, the CFC website as well. We've got a whole website with loads of resources too. So if there's anything you want to follow up, we've got a whole literal plethora of stuff on there. So by all means, we've got other case studies as well, and loads of information. A ransomware calculator if you want to work out roughly how much you think an estimated attack could do. We've got loads of information on there as well. So there's loads of free resources. So please do take advantage of those, even if you can't kind of do cyber for whatever reason right this second. Doesn't mean we are offering loads of advice where we can.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. And I did mention at the beginning of my intro about having that catalyst for change. If you needed it, you come to the right place, and definitely with that and the resources that are on offer there, I think they'll be brilliant. I just wanted to touch on one note, and I'm just going to share in the chat. This is an offer with Immersive Labs for free. Once it pings, there we go. For free access to their platform for improving cybersecurity skills for staff, and this is available. The free license is available till June 2023. So you've got to jump on it quick. But we're talking about that human error and about that staff training. I thought that'd be a good plug now, just to pop in there that this is available. Fantastic work that happens through Digital Social Care to make that happen. But I think I will draw our webinar to a close, if that's okay. And I'd like to thank Matt and Richard for their input, as well as for all of you for attending and asking questions and making this session what it is. We will share the slides afterwards, and the recording that was made, as well as links to those resources too that Matt's mentioned. So absolutely fantastic. Yes, I hope you have got lots of takeaways as promised, and thank you again to Matt and Richard, and I hope you'll have a lovely rest of your day. Hopefully the sun is shining.
Cheers, guys. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Thank you.